Hello everyone and welcome to EGX Digital PAX Online. Before we jump into the panel, I'm going to present you an idea since we'll be referencing it throughout. Digital events this year have focused mostly on video content, like this panel you're about to watch. But the game industry is in a unique position of already having the technology to replicate a full game convention like E3 digitally at home. Let me explain. Imagine a convention, let's call it GameCon. Creative, I know. Imagine GameCon is an app you can access via your console or PC. When you boot it up, you create an account with a display name and a fully customizable avatar. Then you buy your ticket and enter what looks like a game. You have your character, and maybe you could switch between third-person and first-person view, and you could walk around a virtual show floor built entirely in-engine. You could invite friends online to join you, and it could function much like an MMO. Tons of players walking around the show floor, and with this being built in a game engine like Unreal or Unity, there's no need to hold back on the size of booths or large decorations. You could even have your own scenery that matches the game aesthetic, like a jungle or a Viking ship. Now, imagine you could also enter this event in VR. A fully immersive digital event that really feels like you're attending a physical game convention again. Now, it's all well and good walking around a big 3D modeled show floor, but what about the games? Well, that's where streaming comes in. Using a service akin to Stadia or xCloud, you could stream game demos straight to your home from the server. For developers, with streaming, there's no concern about players data mining the demo, finding secrets in the full game, or playing it too often or for too long. You can just limit the amount of plays or time available. Streaming would allow users with lower-end PCs and older consoles to try out the latest gaming has to offer, which could help push console sales and PC upgrades as well. And not just that, I also propose a mobile component. See here. Imagine a GameCon mobile app with no virtual show floor, but a list of games available to try at the event. Click on the game you want to try, read the description, and just play. Here I've overlaid some of the Stadia touch controls to help illustrate the idea. Even users without a console, PC, or VR system could still try what's on offer and explore the event. Then, of course, in the virtual area, you'd have places for panels, live in-engine, tournaments, cosplay competitions over video, and everything else you'd usually see at a gaming convention. Retailers could attend as they usually do as well and provide discounts on online purchases. I believe every single aspect of a digital gaming event could be recreated in a game engine and turned into a playable MMO-style experience to bring events like EGX, Gamescom, and E3 to a worldwide audience. And with that out of the way, let's jump in and meet our panelists. For this, we're going to go into VR to stay topical. Let's go. Okay, now that we're in VR, it's time to meet our panelists. So guys, if you could tell us your name and what you do.
My name's GT from Gaming Tag VR. I'm a content creator and supporter of virtual reality.
Hi, my name is Sam Watson. I'm Immersive Partnerships Director of Make Real, and we create learning, development, training, simulation, and gaming experiences.
Cool, and I am Andreas Juliusson. I am the Chief Marketing Officer from Fast Travel Games, which is a Swedish VR games developer.
Okay, thank you very much. So welcome everyone to Powered by Streaming and VR, the future of digital gaming events. Now, of course, over the last year with the pandemic and everything going on, a lot of events have been forced to go digital, including Gamescom and, of course, PAX Online, EGX Digital that you're watching now. And so what I would like to talk about now is how we think this transition has been handled. Of course, over the course of this year, it's been kind of forced on us, moving our events all over to digital. And I just want to get your guys' thoughts on how we think the game industry in general has handled this transition.
I think, one of the biggest changes since Corona hit during the spring, from an events perspective, is that we have seen a lot of digital events Yeah, I mean, IGN has done something with Summer of Gaming. Steam has done some games festivals. There's Gamescom now taking place, of course. EGX is doing digital as well, and some media outlets like Upload VR has done their own showcase as well, strictly digital. So, as a developer, it's been a little hard to sort of dissect between these different events and understand where to put your priorities. Gamescom has been around for so long now, for example, E3 for ages, EGX as well. So it's quite easily, when you look at those events, you can quite easily see the requirements from a studio's perspective and also the benefits of doing something like that. A digital version, of course, is still a little bit sort of testing the waters, and it's a bit unexplored. So you're throwing your eggs around in different baskets and hope to get some kind of benefit from participating. And there's been a lot of different showcases, which has been a bit tricky for developers, I think, and maybe also for the gaming audience who try to follow everything. Everything is moving around all over the place a little bit. So I think it's good. I think the purpose is great. Trying to find a way to bring gameplay and content to the gamers out there, even though we can't meet up in person right now. But maybe there's lessons to be learned from here. Try to work together and streamline things a little bit more going forward.
Yeah, I think there's been a lot more emphasis on the video, and this is normally like a subsidiary sort of side element that there's going to be trailers and content available around events, keyed into reveals, announcements, keynotes, that kind of thing. But it's kind of an after aside, whereas now it's the main driver. So everyone's had to suddenly up their video game, but at the same time still prepare all those demos and all the content as if they were going to be showing on the show floor, but make it look really good in a demo video rather than actually having a hands-on experience.
Did anyone go into the virtual market in VR chat when that was working? Did anyone check that out here? I'll take that. If you could do a game show like that, like a gaming event like that, that is absolutely superb. I've never experienced anything like that, where literally it was, you walked like you were walking into an event. There was a big bridge. There was like a big Sega sign. There was an Audi car testing. They were doing like a new like an A4 or an A5, and you could get in the car, and it took you on like an automated drive, like you were in the car. But obviously it was detailed like the car inside. And yeah, then you went up to the virtual market. I think you could buy like clothes and items for your avatars and stuff, but it was the idea of what it was. At the end of the day, you could stream a game or have those games ready to download if you wanted to sit down. Like in Onward, for example, at the end of a match, you pick up a virtual headset and go into the game to look around. You potentially could do that with game demos in the future as well. I just think that I think it's a really good idea, stuff like that. But
I think 2021 will be really interesting from this perspective as well. Maybe we'll see people or companies start to do physical events again, to some extent at least. So what will be the future then for the digital event version? What are the learnings from this year that we could potentially apply to a digital event next year, even though we might have a way to meet physically? Are there any wins or benefits of doing this in a digital way? One thing I would like to mention as well is, you mentioned that, Chris, doing events in VR, like the virtual marketplace and all that, can be really exciting to walk around and experience things. The downside, I guess, is that we are only inviting people who are already engaging with VR.
yes,
The benefit of being at Gamescom for some companies, for example, or any other physical event, is that you can introduce people to VR.
yeah,
If a VR headset is required to join an event, you're already excluding people from getting their first VR experience. So that's another aspect, I think. Like, is there a way to create digital or VR specific events in the future that is also inviting new players into the world of virtual reality, so we're not keep on sort of nurturing the same owners of headsets and the same already engaged audiences. That's a challenge for sure, but also like an opportunity. I think we will see maybe in 2021 people start exploring.
I think what has happened at the moment is actually dulled down the potential of the Quest even more, because when I was at Gamescom, I got like an early access look at Beat Saber 360 from the Beat Saber team, and it literally was they was just outside having a coffee, and I was like, oh, can I play it now quickly? And I went into a hallway and played it, and the amount of people who stop and just, what is he doing? What is that? Do you know what I'm saying? And I always think to myself, if you could just cast it onto a screen like standard, that's all you need is a Quest and a screen and someone watching you do the actions. And I really hoped that this year was going to be the year that would happen. That's what I thought was going to happen, and obviously it hasn't. So
no, I think it would have. We actually had quite big plans for Gamescom this year, which would have considered the stuff that you just said. You know, inviting people like yourself to Gamescom to enjoy and engage with exclusive content from games, but also make that content interesting and available for the general audience out there who cannot participate in person, or who might not even own a headset. We had some pretty interesting ways that we have to sort of put on hold for now until for the next time, but we're also trying to find other ways of doing the same thing. But I agree, I think that's something you would probably have seen this year if Corona hadn't happened.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing it's had an impact on is accessories for VR as well. Like VR Cover have made a silicone cover, so you know, all the sweat is purely on that. It won't go near the headset, because I think at the same time, passing a peripheral round now will worry people. They're going to be worried. You know.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in my current work at the moment at Cornerstone, I've had to deal with this a lot since lockdown started. So we do a lot of VR training, and we show a lot of 360 content. And so often we do have to pass one headset to another. And a lot of our clients have been worried about sanitation. They've been asking us, how do we clean these things, and what products do we use? And some of them have even been asking for 2D versions of our content, because they don't necessarily currently want to be passing headsets to one another, especially not knowing how to clean them. So it's meant that we've had to write up cleaning guides. It's made a lot of our clients rethink sanitation. And I think the thing that concerns me is I think potentially some people may have been rethinking buying a VR headset at all, given the current climate.
Yeah, I mean, you know, we've always been very careful with hygiene at events. We've been doing events for 6 years, and we've always had wipes and ninja masks and silicone facial interface replacements, and recently taken some clean boxes and do the whole UVC. But now, you know, theoretically, to cap off that final sort of risk reduction is you've got to set headsets aside for 5 days, which means you've got to have, you know, however many more headsets to compensate for the fact that you can't just clean, leave it for 10 minutes until it's dried, put the next person in. You know, but then you can't have that many headsets at an event to compensate. But then there's an area that does actually benefit us as VR sort of expo demoers or being at events, is the fact that the new event rules mean that the event organizers essentially have to allow 10 square meters per attendee in terms of distancing, which, you know, as VR people, we're used to that, having to have that kind of space anyway. It just means it's going to be much more difficult to actually be that sort of attendee, demoer, booth assistant, etc., to catch them if they fall or help them in and out of the headset. Now it has to be the person doing it. So, you know, it's difficult, as you were saying, you know, people's first time in VR, they need help in and they need help out. So how do we go around that when theoretically we can't get close enough to touch them to put a headset on someone?
Yeah, do you know what I worry about? I don't know whether it's good or not. Like, people have now figured out that maybe you don't need to travel somewhere, maybe you don't need to spend that money, maybe you don't need those people doing those jobs, and it ends up going so digital that you don't go back to what we had. Like Gamescom was, and EGX, they're both absolutely incredible. I hope that doesn't happen, but yeah, sorry.
I'm old and I disagree with you, but anyway.
I mean, you spoke about Gamescom, Chris. We actually met for the first time last summer, at Gamescom.
We did.
And if we have, would not be the same if we hadn't met in person. I'm 100% sure of that. So that's another aspect of the whole thing here now. And it might sound, old school, but I'm a strong believer in connecting with people in real life. So
well, yeah, I mean, I agree. I think there are certain things that will always be unique to physical real life interaction. But do you not think in the future, particularly for people who maybe can't afford to travel to these kind of things, that VR might be able to replicate a lot of that experience, at least more so than video call can? Like if you think about the immersion, not only of being in the headset, but the actual conversation we have with each other, it feels face to face.
In a panel scenario like this, I can turn to both of you when you're speaking and focus upon you.
Yeah.
Or if I want to talk to you specifically, I'm going to give you the attention. Or Callum, you're asking a question, I'm listening, ready to give the answer. They've done a lot of VR events where it's just a presentation, and it kind of hasn't worked quite as well, because you're just sat in the audience looking at a screen, you're not really moving, and it's kind of like, okay, well maybe the social bit afterwards will be good in VR, but I don't necessarily, just to watch a slideshow, I don't necessarily need to be in VR.
Yeah.
But then the realism of the avatars, again, I'm perfectly fine with not having any legs and no arms here. I've been on platforms where the IK is a bit off, and you get so distracted by people sitting in really weird positions in the chairs and their arms going funny that you kind of distract from the point of why you were there in the first place.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the cut-offs from the fantasy of actually doing this in real life.
Yeah.
I mean, that's like the ultimate fantasy would be to have something so believable that you can't really tell the difference. That's of course many years away, but I think what you mentioned, the glitches and stuff like that, is distracting. Yeah, and having eyes and being able to move around is adding to the believability. So I actually feel that I'm here right now in this panel, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
I just have a hard time finding my coffee.
Yeah, of course. I mean, trying to interact in VR and in real life at the same time is an absolute nightmare, and I'm sure we've all tried it. But then, do you think, to an extent, the aim to recreate realism in VR can actually be what breaks that immersion? Of course, there are apps out there with super realistic graphics, but if we think about this from a panel perspective here, we're inside virtual reality, and it feels very much as though I'm hosting a panel and we have audience seats right there and I'm talking to you, looking at who I want to talk to. But ultimately, this isn't all that realistic. We have very cartoony avatars. For me, Echo VR is the most immersive experience I've ever had, and I've made friends in that game who I've later become real-life friends with. And I've gotten to know their body language and more about them, even though in the virtual world they just look like a robot to me. All of that goes out the window. Where my immersion really breaks is when something tries to recreate a real life scenario but is not good enough at recreating that interaction, irrelevant of what it looks like visually.
From a game developer perspective, this is really interesting because our first game came out in 2018 and we released it on Oculus Quest a year after, so last year, and it's called Apex Construct. And it's set in Stockholm in the future, but we decided to go for a very stylized graphical style of the game, and we could potentially aim for photorealism and make the game 5 seconds long. or we could add believability to the game and really put the player in the game with other means. So we focus, instead of focusing on the photorealistic graphics, we decided to focus on believable interactions. So when you move your hands around, or when you pull a drawer open, or you lift up something, that should feel believable. And something that we can achieve in VR, almost as good as in real life, except for the weight of objects maybe. And the way you move around, the way that the robots in the game move around, everything of that, how the birds fly in the air, we added believability to the game with those elements rather than focusing on putting the player in a photorealistic environment. So I think, even from a game dev perspective, there are ways of working with VR to create an absolute amazing fantasy and believability without going the let's mimic the real life way. Let's make this a real life but in VR. Yeah.
So you don't have to make it look realistic. I think certain games have really upped the bar when it comes to interactions as well, like Boneworks, for example, Half-Life Alyx, where at the end of the day, if you want to touch something, the first thing I do, and actually Andreas, your game was one of the first ones that had a hand dryer in it. I'll never forget that. Because the first thing I do when I go into a game, if there is a bathroom, I will try and turn the taps on. I will try and see if the water goes to the hand. I will try and see it. For some reason, I've now got a point of expectation where if there's a vase, I expect it to have some sort of interaction with me because I'm there. I feel like I'm there. And I sort of wonder where that's going to go. It must be quite hard for developers to obviously make sure these worlds, they don't, as Andreas said, I would say Apex has this kind of look. Do you think when you look at the ceilings and the stuff in here, I think of Apex as a similar looking game on the Quest? It doesn't have to look realistic. It just has to interact realistically, I think.
Exactly.
And you mentioned weight as well. There's a game called Undead Citadel due out. I played that at Gamescom. And it was like a wave beat 'em up. Really cool, great looking. But there was no weight. Like I was holding like a 6-foot long hammer and there was no weight to it at all. I could just wiggle it. And I said to him, that I think certain game, what's that other game that's out that really, really nailed it recently? Oh, let me think. Until You Fall. There is a weight to the weapons that is a gameplay mechanic in itself, because if you have one weapon that's heavy, that's going to do more damage, but the other weapon needs to be lighter for your defense. So weapon weight, interaction, again, it all comes down to, in a way, in my head, what is believable. It's not necessarily how things look, it's how they react.
Yeah, I mean, so maybe for events, going forward, that's the angle, interactivity and believability for anyone who's, visiting an event in VR, for example. Not try to create Gamescom again or EGX again, but in VR, but rather do something else that feels super, meaningful to the attendees. So they feel that they are there, and this is highly exclusive. It's believable. I really, really think I am here at the moment. And adding meaningful and fun ways to interact with and engage with the events. I think there's a lot that VR can do there that we cannot do in real life. So maybe there's even a win of doing things in VR, because you can stretch the imagination and do fantastical things in VR that you can't do in real life. So maybe, events could even improve in VR in some elements at least.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at typical events, so, every single developer is weighing up the differences between space, cost, positioning of their booth within a physical set of limitations, and maximizing what they can do within that space. If we take away all of that and we don't look to replicate, oh, well, they've got, a 3x3 shell scheme, therefore I'm going to build that in VR because it's quick and simple. There are no space limitations anymore. A VR event can be as big as you want, because people can teleport and portal between spaces as much as they want. They don't have to, it's not worried about physical size. Obviously, Gamescom is massive in terms of all the different halls and everything you have to travel between. It's ideally being able to teleport between areas to see specific booths. And then it's a case of not replicating those elements where you've got only the front row can actually see the screen, and everybody else is having to sort of crowd over shoulders. Let's not replicate all of that. But that budget that people would have spent, 200, millions, some of them on their booths. Imagine the amount of content that could be created instead for the event to, as you say, make it feel magical, unique for that particular period. But then it's additional content for people to take away and experience post-event as well. And it's far more economically viable and ecologically viable than a t-shirt or a squeegee ball or whatever plastic crap.
And this this is kind of going back to what I said earlier, what I'm worried about, where it gets to a point of where it's a less viable option, it's a less possible option to go down the route of I can't remember how much a pitch is. I asked someone once a pitch about EGX or something, and I can't remember the price, but it was far more than I expected, far more than I expected. And I do think to myself, like, is this maybe a door the way that people will now think this is what we needed? Like, we've been forced to do it, but now we're here. Let's embrace it and see where it goes.
Yeah, but as you say, it's that physical meeting up in real world, forming those real world relationships. How do we ensure that can still happen or feel authentic?
Yeah.
And I think, it's also, the perspective you have. If you take our perspective as a game developer, we did Gamescom last year, but Gamescom honestly was way too costly for us. So the only solution for us to go to Gamescom was to work together with 5 other VR game studios. And that's why, I created the concept called the VR Games Showcase at Gamescom. So 6 studios
Which was
got
incredible.
Together.
Which was incredible.
Thank you. Yeah, no, I'm really proud of the project. And I would have loved to do a version 2 this year. But for us, that was the solution. We did spend quite a lot of money on travel and logistics and printing and just being in Germany for a week, for example. And to your point that's money that we could have spent elsewhere if the whole thing was turned into a digital thing. It would not have been the same event at all. It would have been something else. But as a game developer, our main objective, of course, is to promote our games. That's the reason we do this. Ultimately, we want our games to be loved. We want them to sell a lot. We want them to be, surfaced in influential channels and get the hype and awareness it needs to become something than just another VR game. And that's the main question for us then as a developer. How would we do that if an event turned into a digital version of let's say Gamescom, for example? Because what we did at Gamescom was to give access to our game and early access to our game for a handpicked selection of key people from both press and from the content creating segment on YouTube primarily, which was highly valuable for us. Of course, we got connections that we can build upon, relationships, and we also got massive coverage during Gamescom and the weeks following Gamescom. So putting the game in center, there's still a lot of uncertainty around what we would have done in a similar fashion in a VR manner, so to speak. But that's, of course, there's opportunities and possibilities. I'd love to see, some kind of VR event where you get access to a game exclusively through that event by participating.
Yeah.
And as a VR developer as well, we're not too concerned about not selling VR as a concept to the non-VR audience. Our primary objective is to get VR owners hyped about our game. But of course, first party like PlayStation or Oculus or Valve, they will want to use, because events for them is key to invite new people to VR. That's another angle to it that luckily we don't have to concern ourselves with, but I can imagine that all these stakeholders when it comes to physical events would have different say in what a VR event could be for them.
Okay then, so bringing it back to the GameCon pitch, could game streaming potentially solve this issue? if you had the GameCon digital style event, this pitch, right? Let's say it's an EGX digital, where you can, in or out of VR, walk around a virtual show floor in engine. You could go up to the Fast Travel Games booth, however you want to design that, and connect to a server and stream the game. Could that solve the issue? I know in some cases developers have released demos on Steam, but from what some developers have explained to me, the big concern with early downloadable demos is data mining. They release a playable demo, and then suddenly tons of info regarding unrevealed, unfinished, or even cut parts of the game start flooding the internet. But with game streaming, this wouldn't necessarily be an issue, as people don't have access to the actual game files. And on top of that, considering a virtual booth you could design however you wanted, regardless of budget or anything like that.
I just think it'd be awesome if like you had an EGX Plus or a Gamescom Plus where, because people obviously can still physically go to the event, but as you're saying, there's like a virtual version of that as well. Almost that'd be superb.
I mean, one of the reasons, or actually the main reason why we never did consumer show floor at Gamescom last year, and we hadn't planned on doing so for this year either, is the fact that you need so much manpower and security for your equipment, and you need to be able to handle long lines of people. It's going to cost us a lot of money to just get the manpower on location to handle all that. And there's, of course, the booth branding that you need to take care of. Unless you work directly with, PlayStation or Facebook, for example. If you go to Gamescom as a standalone VR gaming studio, there is no chance you can have your own booth for consumers. So we decided to focus on press and content creators, which was good for what it was, but VR could potentially open up an opportunity for us to also invite consumers to try out our games in an early version without having the challenges of flying people to a physical event, or without having to pay up for a booth area, without the added security of having computers that are not guarded, for example. So potentially this could mean that more VR game developers, or game developers in general, could add the consumer element to events going forward, if it's all taking place in a virtual world or a digital manner, which is really, really, of course, interesting for us.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're a long way from being able to technically stream VR realistically to a headset from a cloud-based server with low latency, etc. Certainly, we could create 360 video experiences of the game and have it as a very sort of extended gameplay trailer or something like that. But I mean, Stadia, cloud streaming services, they're getting there. They're getting better. We were going to do a panel about 5G, so that's not too far away. It's a couple of years away from being a bit more mainstream and the low latency stuff being more relevant. But at the moment we are limited to making content available to people to download who already have a headset. Thankfully, things like VR Chat or Altspace, they have a desktop, a flat version that people can watch this in, or can stream that to YouTube, etc. You don't have to be in VR to experience this, but ultimately it's that element that it's the additional immersion, presence, and the enhanced features of feeling like you're there with the panelists or with the other attendees that brings that benefit. But we can still release content and make stuff available to people to try. And as you're saying, your job is to sell your game. Our job isn't necessarily to sell VR hardware, but in a way, we've all been doing it for past 6-8 years or whatever, and the number of times we're at events, people assume that we are selling the headsets. And it's like, no, we're here with our content. We're not selling the headsets. If you want a headset, go to this, that, the other shop, or Oculus or Vive.com. But could probably make a sideline having some units available, but it's it's not the main purpose is to, you're targeting people who've got VR, because if they've tried it, they're more likely to go away and buy it if they have the headset available. But at a lot of events, people love the VR, they love the experience. It doesn't always necessarily matter what the actual game title is. It's just they've got to try VR. But you then speak to them and they're like, well, there's no way my PC could run it, or I can't afford a Quest, or I can't afford PSVR. And it's from a horrible business, very direct orientated focus. It's like, I've just spent 15 minutes with this person and it hasn't resulted in a sale. But ultimately, as a community thing, you're building and maintaining that level of excitement that they will hopefully one day become a VR owner. But it's not our job to sell VR.
I think going digital won't help VR, because as we all know, you have to get in the headset to know what you're talking about, to know that experience. And just from my point of view, I used to just do PSVR all the time, and that wasn't me on camera. I didn't have a PC. It would just be through the headset. So everyone who pretty much watched me would be either someone looking for a particular game, or they already had it. As soon as I started putting myself on screen, I've now got people watching that don't necessarily have a headset, but they're pre-ordering one, or they're planning to get one, because I guess when they see me doing the actions of what's on screen, they can sort of get a general idea of what VR is about.
Absolutely, and even looking at it from a third-person perspective, when you're an onlooker, as I've said, to me right now, it feels very much like I'm in this room, I'm doing this panel, and I'm talking to you guys face to face. I'm hoping that, and I believe that even for the audience watching on the stream right now, that compared to like a Zoom call, where there is that strong disconnect, where you've got the 4, video feeds from each individual person, there's still that interaction missing, where even though right now we're in this virtual, almost cartoony environment, our natural interaction, both with hand gestures and looking to one another when we're talking to each other, I think, despite the lack of realism visually, I think that not only sells people a little more on the idea of VR, but also I think that's more interesting to watch. It feels a lot more true to life than a Zoom call does. And, going beyond that, even outside of, this panel and events and things like that, even when you're inside a game or an experience, I've experienced this a lot. If you're in something that supports cross-play across devices, both in and out of VR, people are impressed by the interactivity alone. They're on a 2D device, they're a bit limited on what they can do. But when in virtual reality, can, reach down, pick things up and interact.
I think part of the problem as well is you're talking earlier about, the effectiveness of Zoom and people using laptop webcams, etc. We are just coming out the back of a pandemic, touch virtual wood, no second wave, etc. But everything was out of stock as well. You couldn't buy decent microphones, you couldn't buy decent webcams, you couldn't buy VR headsets.
Yeah, that's right.
So there was a slight limitation of what you could get your hands on, to so to speak. Whereas we obviously, being in VR, we've got all the headsets, and we've probably got more than one at home to choose from, and we can choose to be tethered or untethered or whatever. But it's been doubly hard. Why hasn't VR, the pandemic is VR's moment, etc. But it's like, well, yeah, but we still have to sell it, and it still has to be available to buy. And you're asking a lot more of people to take that risk or take that gamble on £400 or £1,000 to upgrade their PC to try it out, without being able to try it, without going to events. So.
And that's why the non-VR PC, console and mobile apps, as it were, are such an important part of the GameCon idea and pitch, is because you know, these headsets, they are expensive, they are a particular use case, you might not want to be in them longer than, you know, 2 hours at a time. And for a lot of people, you know, they would love to be able to access these games and these events and interact with the gaming community and industry from whatever device they have. You know, even if that's a mid-range smartphone, even if that's a base console, whether that's a PC that's maybe mid-spec, you know, game streaming opens up a lot of possibilities for people who can't afford the VR tech, and so that's why such an important pillar of this pitch is that mobile app and that PC app. But, you know, for exhibitors, there's a lot of money to be saved in participating in digital events that can maybe be spent on VR equipment and putting together an amazing digital event.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if we're focusing on digital events, then, you know, if you're going to be spending a few, you know, 100,000 on your booth, you could just buy a lot of Quests or other headsets and, you know, do competitions or send those out to your key fans, etc., who've been following you prior to the event, to actually bring them into it that way. And then they've got a VR headset, and you're helping the economy or the community, because obviously they're going to want other titles to go on it.
If events were to turn digital, and if studios like us would start to focus on the opportunities of getting consumers involved and have demos for our games, that changes a lot, because what we did for Gamescom was sort of a handheld curated session of our game where we could talk to you in advance, tell you about the fact that this is quite early, you might, you know, go the wrong way here at the beginning. That what we did at Gamescom last year could never have been a standalone demo that we just handed out to people. We couldn't have just sent you that experience. Maybe you, because you're so professional, but, you know, some other people, we need to hand hold while we demo things like that. So a standalone demo is something completely different than having a team leading a content creator or a journalist through a short session of their upcoming game, which is, you know, and that's also one of the reasons why you don't see many demos for VR games today. If you look at the PlayStation Store, there's not a lot at all. Oculus, I think, have 8 or 9 demos on their store, and they haven't done a demo in a long time now. And that's part of the reason as well. Like, a consumer demo, a consumer-friendly demo that doesn't require hand-holding is usually not part of a developer's plans, because it's such a tedious and resource-heavy thing to do. And most studios today, at least, are relatively small, with maybe 5 to 10 or 20 people in the studio. Some are bigger, of course, but most are around there. So while a digital event would open up a lot of opportunities, we would have to look at ourselves and say, are we staffed, and do we have the resources internally to capitalize on these new opportunities? And today I would say no, but, you know, we would have to rethink our staffing and our timelines and go-to-market plans, for example, and budgets to cater for that, which we'll happily to do if there is a return on investment on it. But that's a challenge for studios, I think, today.
Well, I think many big studios with traditional gaming, you know, Gamescom, EGX, E3, GDC, getting the demo ready for that is just another thing that adds to the crunch and to the schedule pressures. So with, as you say, with smaller studios, it's just something that's not feasibly possible with the resources, with the people, and with the budgets available. But
exactly, and if you do it, it's true. If you do it once the game is out, you will have lost the momentum of your pre-launch phase, like building up the hype, and that's when the game is in perfect shape. Hopefully, it's when it's out. The exclusivity of getting early access to something that no one has tried before is a main thing for guys like Chris here.
Yes.
Getting to Gamescom and being the first to play 6 new VR games. That was the main reason, I guess, why the Gamescom showcase was such an enticing and exciting thing to participate in. If we were to do a consumer demo in the same way for a game that's already on the market, there wouldn't be much interest from people like you, for example.
Yeah, I guess
and the
so.
game would already be out. So yeah, it's I'm just talking about the challenges from a studio, but and opportunities, of course.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's where part of the GameCon pitch comes in. If you invited GT or another VR content creator to check out your game, you could invite his specific account to play your game, and you could maybe change the time limit they have. So one of the things in this pitch is that to avoid people going too far in the game, you could restrict how long they're able to play for, and that avoids you having to make specific E3 demos. You could just boot up the game and they have a certain amount of time. With a content creator, you could talk to them, walk them through it, give them as much time as they need. If you were able to do that as part of a digital event, would that work for you?
I mean, I think in theory it sounds amazing. Yeah. But I haven't yet taken part of a stream event that hasn't had its glitches and technical difficulties. I'm not sure how comfortable you would be putting all your eggs in a streaming basket as a studio, so to speak. Of course, things go south at Gamescom as well, but at least you're in total control because you're there in person. So, but in theory, if everything goes smoothly, absolutely, I can definitely see that happen. And I think we will start to see stuff like that happen already next year, to be honest. Not the full streaming demo handheld by devs, but parts of it will probably happen sometime, I think, over the next year or so.
I completely agree. Unfortunately, that is all the time we have. Thank you everyone for tuning in to Powered by Streaming and VR, the future of digital gaming events here at PAX Online EGX Digital. Be sure to check out all the other awesome digital content at the rest of the show. I hope this has provided a new perspective on how digital gaming events can be done in the future thanks to game streaming and potentially virtual reality. Now, just before we go, guys, if you could let these guys know where they can find you.
So we're called Fast Travel Games, and fasttravelgames.com, I guess, is the easiest way to follow us on social media. We're called @FastTravelGames, and our latest horror VR game is called @Wraith Afterlife. So hook us up there and make sure to follow us.
It's Make Real VR on Twitter, makereal.co.uk on the web. Me personally, I am VR_Sam, and our games are Radial G and Loco Dojo, which will come up in Google.
Nice. Just @GamerTag VR. You can find me on YouTube, Twitch, Twitter, Facebook gaming, and pretty much every social media platform everywhere pretty much. So yeah, it's all good. Thank you for the opportunity for allowing me
Thank you all for taking part. It's been a really fun discussion. You can find me @Multicallum on Twitter, and thank you again for tuning in, and enjoy the rest of PAX Online EGX Digital. Thanks everyone. Bye.